Hello and welcome back. My name is Redboot, and this is a playthrough of Pendragon, The Fall of Roman Britain. The game is designed by Marc Gouyon-Rety and is part of the Coin series by GMT Games, which was designed by V.2. So I think in the last episode we got the setup all ready to go, and the board is ready to go, so I think we don't need any further ado. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we'll do is flip the first couple of cards. So we've got as our first card the Isle of Avalon. And the on-deck card is Pelagius. So the Isle of Avalon indicates that we can either move 5 cavalry from casualties to available or move 5 cavalry from casualties to out of play. So at this point in the game, this is obviously an ineffective card. And the Saxons are going first. So we're going to go to the bot flowcharts and figure out what the Saxons are going to do. So looking at the flowcharts, we see that they are going to raid with a Ravage command. The reason they use Ravage and not Surprise is because the victory level of the Britain faction is quite high right now, well over 2 under the threshold. So they're going to ravage to try to take some extra prosperity away. I assume that's the reason for that rule. And in rolling, the locations of the raids, we're going to be, I rolled a 2, so we're going to be concentrating on areas where there's a high difference in population minus enemy troops as opposed to them moving into the fens. So I'm going to go ahead and do some rolling and figure out where they're going to attack. And so they've selected 3 raids, and those raids are going to be in Iceni, as well as Atrebates and Durotriges. So now let's roll to see how many Saxons are going to attack in each location. So first we're going to roll 3 die 4 rather, for Iceni. And they roll 7. And 3 will be taken away from that because there are 3 forts on the Oceanus Germanicus coast. So that means that there will be 4 raiders in Iceni. So we'll put 4 raiders on the Iceni coast, waiting to move inland. There we go. And roll for Atrebates. So Atrebates rolls 1, 4, and 3. So that is 8 minus 3 for the forts is 5. So the Saxons are getting some pretty decent rolls here. So we're going to put 5 Saxon raiders in Atrebates. So we'll put those on the coast. And 1 more set of rolls to make for Durotriges. And in Durotriges, the Saxons are going to roll 1, 1, 3, which is going to be a mere 2 raiders. And so we'll put 2 raiders on the coast of Durotriges. So the first thing we do after a landing is we plunder. And this is going to be pretty effective for the Saxons because in using a Ravage feat, they are not constrained by only taking the limit of 2 population from Iceni, 3 population from Atrebates, 2 population from Durotriges. They can take as much as there is. So that means that in Iceni they are going to take 4 plunder. So that cleans out the Iceni region. And moving down to Atrebates, the situation is about as bleak. There are 6 prosperity tokens there, blocks, and 5 Saxon raiders. So we'll be taking 5 of the blocks, putting them on the Saxons because of the Ravage command. Now remember, as we do this, and I'm not going to do it with my left hand because it's hard enough to do it with my right hand. There is no assault or attack in using the Ravage feat. So although the Saxons will not battle, I can battle them back and possibly take some of this plunder away from them at the end of the turn. That's part of the Ravage command, but that comes after we roll to see if the population is depleted. So before we do that, let's move on to Durotriges. And in Durotriges, a little bit less stark a problem, but they're going to take 2 plunder. Oh, I need to move that down. They're going to take 2 plunder off the top row. And that's it for plunder. So part of the Ravage command is that there could be a depletion in population due to the raiding Saxons moving population out of and refugees out of the region. So we're going to roll in Iceni, Atrebates, and Durotriges a 1d6, and I'm just going to do that very quickly. In Iceni, they roll a 3, so the population is not affected. In Atrebates, they roll a 1, so the population is not affected. And in Durotriges, they also roll a 1. So lucky for the Britons, there's no depletion in population from the Ravage command. So the last thing that happens in a Ravage combined with a raid is that the Britons can force a battle out in the open. And I'm not really sure what the most prudent course here is. In Iceni, for example, they have 4 raiders, 1 militia. So we could destroy 1 Saxon before the other 3 Saxons destroy the militia. There's no assault on the fort, so we could replace that militia at some point in the future. I'm not sure if that's the best thing to do or not, but because I'd probably rather use that militia to get into the fort during a surprise attack sometime in the future. On the other hand, it does deprive the Saxons of a plunder, but I probably can deprive them of a plunder on the next phase because the Dukes come up next on the next card and probably will end up doing an intercept command. And I think that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. So I'm not going to force battle in Iceni. For similar reasons, I'm not going to force battle in Durotriges because once again I'm going to lose that militia because I will attack first during a melee, do half a point of damage, which will kill one of these Saxon raiders, but then the Saxon will strike back during the harass phase of the battle and kill my militia. And I think I'd rather take my chances and see what happens during a Dux intercept command on the next turn. Now in Atrebates, I have a little bit different situation because I have more troops there. So I can actually, because I have a Dux cavalry and I have a militia, I can actually do 3 damage on them. And then they can only do 1 damage on me. The problem with them doing 1 damage on me is I'm going to lose the cavalry. So, wow, these are really hard choices, as it turns out. But I think I won't do battle because I don't want to lose that cavalry. And I'm probably going to be able to nail them pretty well during the next Dux intercept phase. So I think I'm not going to force battle, and that's going to end the Saxon turn. I'd be very interested in hearing what you all think of that decision, but I haven't done battle in any of these areas, and so let's see what happens. Hopefully we can cut back on the amount of plunder taken by the Saxons before they actually return. So on to the next segment of the Isle of Avalon card, and by looking at it we see that the Scotti go next. And again, the Scotti are going to raid, but this time they don't have a Ravage, and I need to determine whether or not they are going to use surprise or ransom. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll explain that as best I can when I come back. Well, having looked through the bot flowcharts, it looks like, yes, we are going to raid, and I rolled a 4, which means that we're going to target 4 regions with 2 die 4. Where the Scotti already are, that are adjacent to where the Scotti are, is the first priority. Second priority, which of course there's none. The enemy control is the next priority, and they're all enemy controlled. And so the next one is the highest difference in population minus enemy troops. So the population differential of -1 in Durotriges and Parisi up here at the top are the highest priorities. And then I did a random roll and determined that the population differential of 0 between Novantai down here and Dumnoi will be the next priorities. I then determined that they will not surprise with raid because there are no higher priority targets inland where prosperity exceeds the number of enemy troops. One possibility is that they would have raided Atrabates, but since that has already been thoroughly plundered by the Saxons, it's not sufficiently attractive a location for a raid to warrant that. So my determination is that a ransom feat is going to accompany the raid command. So let's go ahead and see how the Scotti fare on their raid, and we'll start up here with Parisi. So we're going to roll 2 die 4 to determine how many go, and oh wow, they rolled an 8, and there is no subtraction because the oceans are not patrolled. So in Parisi, the Scotti are going to raid with 8 raiders. And that's a lot of raiders. So we'll put those off the coast. I'm going to put those not in the region, but just in their boats off the coast, if you will, just to keep that a little bit neater. And now we'll roll for Novantai up in the north. And in Novantai, the roll is going to be, wow, another 8. We're going to run out of raiders here. So that's going to be another massive raid. So we'll put these raiders up in Novantai, possibly having crossed from Caledonia as Picts, possibly from the ocean, from Ireland. Not really sure, but we'll sort of stick them up there, and I have a feeling there's going to be a little bit of carnage up there. So let's go down to Dumnoi in what is now Cornwall, and we'll take a roll. And they rolled a 7. Wow, they're really rolling crazy. So we're going to put 7 raiders in Dumnoni, coming in most probably from the Irish coast. And finally, Durotriges, which is right here. Let's take a roll. And in Durotriges, they roll a 4. And so we put 4 Scotti raiders on the coast here in Durotriges. By the way, a couple of minor things to clear up. There was some bookkeeping I forgot during the Saxon turn, so I want to clean that up. Secondly, I was kind of joking about the raiders in Novantai coming from either Caledonia or Hibernia. But the reality is it matters, because if they come from Caledonia, then they would be subtracted by the forts in Carwetii and Textonawera. So they actually come from Ireland. So not that it really matters. It's still a hunk of raiders up there. But I did want to clear that up because it might matter later in the game. The other thing is the Saxons took 11 plunder. So one thing we need to do is we need to reduce the prosperity in the region and the prosperity plus prestige markers by 11. So we're going to move the prosperity plus prestige down from 80 to 69, and we're going to move total prosperity down from 80 to 69. Finally, the Saxons have to pay their renown costs So they did 3 raids at their maximum effort, so their renown is going to move from 10 down to 4. Now the Scotti, I don't believe, used any renown to do 2d4 attacks. Oh, no, sorry, they do. They do use 1 renown to do a d4 attack, so while I'm here, I will move 1, 2, 3, 4 down to 2 renown to account for the Scotti raids. And now we're ready to move on with those raids. So the first thing we do, and we'll do Parisi first, is that we take plunder. And in this case, since we're not using the Ravage command of the Saxons, we're only going to take 2 plunder, because you take the lesser of the amount of plunder or the amount of raiders. So we take 2 plunder from the countryside. And then we decide whether we want to do battle. And I guess I'll go through I think it's obvious that they're going to do battle, but let me go through the spreadsheets, the flowcharts, and just make sure that's the case. Yeah, so they are assured of a successful assault. So the way that we'll resolve this is, first of all, we'll withdraw into the hill fort. So there will be no field battle. And then they will assault the hill fort. There's no coup de main because there's no surprise. So the first thing that happens is there's an escalade, and the militia and the garrison unit in the hill fort, which counts as 1, so a total of 1.5 points, will escalade and will destroy 1.5 points worth of Scotti raiders, which is 3 raiders. And then the remaining raiders storm the battlements, and they will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage, and that is sufficient to kill the militia and to get rid of the hill fort. And they take that region, although they don't control it, remember, because raiders don't control regions, don't count for control towards regions. So that region is now uncontrolled. So we'll take the Britain control marker off. So looking at the battle consequences, we see, first of all, that they can plunder the fort. So we take 2 plunder from off map, which was sitting in the fort, and we put that on top of the Scotti raiders. And then because this was a barbarian faction, lost fewer pieces than the enemy and survived, the Scotti will gain 1 renown. So that moves the Scotti renown up to 3. So we're going to have a similar situation up in Noantai, and what's going to happen here is they're going to plunder the countryside for 1. They're then going to decide to do battle, because they have because they're assured of an assault on the fort. So the militia will withdraw into the fort. There's no coup de main, because there's no surprise. So in the escalade, the militia and the fort garrison destroy 3 Scotti raiders. So we'll take those off the board. And the Scotti raiders destroy the fort and the militia. We'll put those down into the available forces pool. And once again, because they destroyed a fort, they get 2 additional plunder from the hill fort. So we'll put those there. And finally, the Scotti gain a renown because they lost less pieces than the other side. So that's 2 down and 2 to go. Now we're really going to have an identical situation here in Dumnoni, because even though there are only 7 raiders, they're still assured of an assault. So they're going to take 1 plunder. They're going to decide to battle. There's no field battle because there's a withdrawal into the fort. No coup de main either. So in the escalade step, 3 Scotti militia, Scotti raiders are removed. And the remaining 4 do 2 damage, which is enough to kill off the militia. Sorry, they do 4 damage. And the town, in this case, which move into the available forces. Now, each town destroyed, slightly different in terms of battle consequences, reduces prestige by 2, but since prestige at the moment is at 0, there's no effect. But they do take plunder, and in this case it's 3 plunder, because it's a town and therefore more prosperous. So we'll put 3 plunder out onto the 3 unladen Scotti raiders. Oh goodness. Well, one more try and we'll screw it. We'll do it later. And we move to Durotriges. Next door. Now, Durotriges is the one that's a little bit different because there weren't as many raiders. So the raiders are going to take 2 plunder during the plunder phase. So we'll put those out. But they're not going to offer battle because they're not assured of a successful assault. There's only 4 of them. 3 of them would be destroyed during the escalade phase, leaving only 1 to assault the fort, to assault the town, and they would not be successful. So they're not going to offer battle in this case. Notice, by the way, that because the additional plunder from the towns and forts that were plundered in Novantii, Parisi, and Dumnonii are not from the prosperity of the region, but from inside the fort, they don't count towards the total prosperity of the region. So I do want to make sure that we get the bookkeeping right, though, on the prosperity for the non-forts. And in this case, we took 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plunder from the non-battle. So let's the non-battle phases during the plunder phase. So we'll account for that by moving total prosperity and prosperity plus prestige from 69 to 63. Now finally, I probably did this a little out of order, but I now am going to do the ransom. And we're going to ransom in each region. And in order to do that, we roll a 1 die 6, and on a 4 to 6, we move resources from the Britons to the Scotti as ransom. So we do that in 4 regions. So let's see how we do. So first of all, in Parisi, we roll a 4. So that's 1 transferred resource. In Novantii, we roll a 6 actually, and so that's another. In Dumnonii, we roll a 4, and in Durotriges, we roll a 4. So that means that 4 resources are transferred from the Britons to the Scotti, to Scotti renown. So let's go ahead and do that. This moves to 21, and Scotti renown moves from 4 up to 8. One quick bookkeeping thing: the Briton control of Novantii is gone, and Briton control of Dumnonii is gone. So the Britons have lost 1, 2, 3, 4 control of population. So we move the population control marker from 40 down to 36. Well, I'd say that was a pretty successful raid sequence by the Saxons and the Scotti. They generated a lot of plunder, took away a lot of prosperity and control, and basically wreaked havoc upon the island. So it's time to strike back. And I think we're ready to do that. So we're going to take Pelagius, which is the next card, move that down to that pile, and flip over the next card, which is Romanitas. And also, we're going to move the Saxons from eligible to command plus feat, and the Scotti to limited command or event. Now remember, in the solitaire rules, the non-players, when they are enabled to take a limited command, they can actually take a full command plus feat and that's why the Scotti actually were able to do 4 regions instead of 3, instead of just 1. That's supposed to give an advantage to the bots. I've opted not to do the easier easier rules by sort of playing it more straight. I'm not sure if that's a good decision or not, and looking at the board after this and the havoc that was wreaked by these raids, I'm not sure that was the right decision. But that's what I did, and that's what the rules are, so let's move on. So the Dukes go first in the Pelagius card, and I think it's clear at this point that they are going to intercept and try to punish the raiders for what they've done. And by the way, before I get too much further, I guess it's not immediately obvious that intercept is the only option. I have the Pelagius card, which says that I can add prosperity equal to population in each of 4 regions. And that's not unattractive because obviously I've lost a lot of prosperity, and so I could pick 4 regions and add quite a bit of prosperity, maybe up to 8. But I think intercept is still the way to go because there are something like 17 plunder cubes out there right now, which would add to Scotti and Saxon renown quite a bit if I just let it stand. So in thinking about it a little bit, I don't think there's much of a choice. I am going to intercept, and the only thing I really need to think about is whether to use the invite feat or not. And that's something I need to think about a little bit. So I think what I've decided to do here is not use a feat and limit the ability of the Cubitates to act on the next on this card. And I'm not convinced at this point that invite is something I need to do this early in the game. It strikes me that it's something that I might want to do a little bit later when A, I have more access to resources, and B, there might be a little bit more of a problem with the amount of cavalry I have. But right now, with a full complement of cavalry and sort of looking around the board, I feel pretty good about doing some damage on this intercept command. So first we're going to move the Scotti and the Saxons to ineligible, and we'll move the Dukes to command only with no feat. Now looking at the board, I want to try to maximize my opportunity here. So Noantai obviously needs to be attacked, and the only place it can be attacked from is Karwetii, because there's no roads leading into that area, so I can only move from an adjacent spot. So I am going to place a pawn in Karwetii. It costs 2 resources for each origin space to do an intercept command. In Iceni, down here, it's a similar situation. There's no roads leading into that area. So there's only 2 cavalry, one from Corieltawi and one from Trinoantes, that can move into Iceni. Iceni's a little bit dangerous because, as is Noantai, the first one, because they're both home terrain for the barbarians that are in that terrain. So that means that there's a possibility of ambush, and that's a little dangerous. But I am going to place pawns in Trinoantes and Corieltawi and attack from there. Now, Parisi is a little easier for 2 reasons. One, there's road leading into that region from Eberacum. And 2, the Scotti are not in their home terrain, so ambush is not a possibility. And since there are 5 of them, I'm going to go ahead and move from Eberacum. Probably move 3 into that region. Need to get rid of the pawns down here that were originally there for the Scotti. Now in Durotriges, I have a number of options because the roads lead into Durotriges. So I can move some troops from Eberacum all the way down into Durotriges, and I can move from Silures into Durotriges because I have six barbarian raiders to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pawn in Silures. Dumnonii is a loss at this point. There's no way I can get in there. There's no roads leading into it, and there's no Dux cavalry next to it. So there will be no intercept in Dumnonii. So I think that's it. I think I don't need to put a pawn in Atrabates because I have plenty of troops to go around, and I've already used quite a few resources. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns that I've placed in origin spaces. And therefore, I'm going to move from 21 resources for the Britons down to 11 resources for the Britons. So already getting a little bit of tight, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens later in this round when the resources are scant. So let's go ahead and move those troops. We're going to move 3 cavalry from Karwati into Nuantai from the fort there. We're going to move 3 cavalry from the city of Eberacum into Parisi. In Iceni, we're going to take a little bit of a risk, and we're going to move 1 cavalry from Coreltavi and 1 from Trinoantes. And finally, in Durotriges, we're going to move 2 from 1 actually from Silures, and 2 down the roads from Eberacum. So that's the plan. Let's see how it goes region by region. So according to the non-player battle tactics chart, the raiders in Nuantai are going to attempt to evade. And they evade on a 4 to 6. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see how they do. And here's hoping for a 1, 2, or a 3. Well, they rolled a 5, so they evaded successfully. So that's it for Nuantai. So in Parisi, the situation is a little bit different. They're not in home terrain, so they can't ambush. And they can try to evade, and they will try to evade, but they only do it on a 6 because it's clear terrain. So they roll a 3, so they're not successful in evading, so there will be a battle there. And in the field battle there, oh, that's Iceni. Go back up to Parisi. In the field battle there, the Saxon raiders are all going to be wiped out because the Dux cavalry do 3 damage, which is 6 raiders in a field battle. And they do that damage before the raiders have an opportunity to strike back in the harassment phase. So those raiders are gone, and that is a success. A successful intercept for the Dux. So now we'll go down to Iceni, and we see here that the Saxons have an opportunity to either ambush or evade. And according to the battle tactics, ravaging Saxons, which these are going to attempt to ambush and do damage to the Dux. And they do that on a 5 or a 6. So let's see what they roll and hope that they roll low. And they do. They roll a 1. So there's no ambush there. And so the attack is not simultaneous. In fact, the Dux go first, and they will eliminate these Saxon raiders in Iceni, along with their plunder, unfortunately. Actually, now that I think of it, in Parisi, we can add the plunder back into, one of the plunder back into regional prosperity, and we can do the same thing in Iceni. And that will actually add total prosperity and prosperity plus prestige up 2. In addition, the Dukes get 2 prestige, 1 for Parisi and 1 for Iceni, because they destroyed more pieces. So off board, I will go ahead and move the Dukes prestige up from 0 to 2. Now finally in Durotriges, we can only choose 1 faction. So I made a mistake actually in bringing all 3 cavalry down there. It's sort of overkill. I didn't actually need to put a pawn in Silure, so I'm actually going to reverse that. I'm going to put a cavalry back into Silures, remove that pawn, and just move the cavalry from Eberacum, which gives me 2 more resources, back up to 13. And the reason for that is I can't fight both the Saxons and the Scotti. I have to choose 1 faction to fight, and I'm going to choose the Scotti faction. And since they're in clear terrain, they can only evade, and they can only evade on 6. And they roll a 3. So they fail to evade, and therefore they will be wiped out, along with the plunder, one of which can go back into regional prosperity, and will, moving prosperity plus prestige up to 66, and destroying these 4 Scotti raiders, which moves Dukes prestige up to 3. So I think that takes care of all the bookkeeping for that turn. Not entirely successful. Didn't get the... I got the evade up in Noantai, so I didn't get to kill the troops up there. Parisi and Iceni were successful. And Durotriges, successful. I was thinking that I'd be able to get all of the barbarians, but I'd forgotten that I can't. And then, of course, in Dumnoni, in Cornwall, there's nothing I can do at this point. So... not a bad turn all told. So let's see what the Civitates are going to do. Now remember, the Civitates cannot use the Pelagius card because the Dukes only used a limited command with no feat. So the Civitates are limited to a single command with no feat in 1 region. So I think because they lost a few pieces, the Civitates are just going to do a muster command. And it seems as though the best place to muster is Atrebates, because we get 1 militia per town, which is 1 in Atrebates, and we get 1 per population. So that's going to be 3 population in that region. So we get 4 troops, militia in Atrebates. We don't have any wealth, so we can't convert those into comitates. But, and I'm not even sure comitates are available at this point. I'll have to look that up. They may become available later. But in any event, we're going to place 4 militia there. And that will be the end of the Civitates turn. So we're done with the Pelagius card. Now that costs 2 resources, so we'll move our resources down from 13 to 11. Then we move our eligibility markers. The Saxons and the Scotti move back to eligible, and the Dukes and the Civitates move to ineligible. And we're ready for the next card, which is Romanitas. So we'll move Romanitas to the discard pile, and we'll flip over the next card, which is Evangelization. So the Romanitas card, the Dukes would ordinarily go first, but the Romanitas, they're ineligible, so the 2 barbarian factions will go next. And it says in 1 region, replace each cavalry with any warband and each fort with 1 settlement. So that might be something that the Saxons might want to do, particularly in Contiaki, where that fort borders both Oceanus Germanicus and Oceanus Britannicus, and therefore has subtraction effects on raids into both areas. So I don't know, let's think about that, but that's sort of an initial thought. So that's the Romanitas card. So having checked the player bot, one of the things that you do in this situation is you're to choose between the event and the possibility of a return command. You roll 2 dice 6 and figure out if that's less than or equal to the number of plunder that you have available for return, then you actually go with return. If not, then you go with the event. And although the event I think is quite powerful, in this case I rolled a 6, and according to the bot, because I have 7 Saxon plunder to return, and that's greater than my die roll, I'm actually going to return and not use the Romanitas command. So the other thing too is I'm not going to use a settle feat, because the number of raiders that I have in each location does not outnumber the total of the number of other pieces. Interestingly, although I didn't realize this at the time, the Civitates decision to muster in Atrebates was the difference between the Saxons being able to do a settlement in Atrebates or not, or at least build warbands there, because these 4 militia enabled me to outnumber the Saxon troops. So this is just going to be a simple return command. So the plunder of 7 will come off the board, as well as the Saxon 7 warbands, raiders. And that will be converted into Saxon renown, which will move the Saxon renown from 4 up to 11, which is a pretty good little leap. And that's the end of the Saxon cut at the Romanitas card. So therefore the Saxons are taking a command only with no feat in 2 regions, which means that the Scotti can only take a limited command. They can't use the event. And of course, because of the rules, they can actually take a full command plus feat, because they're the non-player. So let's see what the Scotti are going to do. Well, according to the decision tree, the Scotti are going to pass. And the reason for that is that I rolled very high on the plunder die roll. I rolled a 9, and they only have 7 plunder awaiting return. So they're not going to use the return command. They can't use the Romanitas event because they're not eligible to do so under the sequence of play. But they are the first faction to come up on the Evangelization card that's coming up, and therefore they are going to pass. So the Scotti pass, and that means that we're done with the Romanitas card. So the Civitates and the Dukes move over to eligible. The Saxons will move to ineligible. And we will move to the next card, which is the Evangelization card, the 4th card in the deck. And we'll flip over the next card, which is Barbarian Alliance. And since the Scotti are going to go first this turn, let's read the Evangelization event. It says, in 1 region, coastal to Oceanus Hibernicus, Scotti can replace 1 hill fort with 1 settlement, and half of Civitates troops rounded down with warbands. So, might not be much on the warband front, but it might be a good way for them to settle near the Oceanus Hibernicus. So let's check that out. I have a feeling, because this is a shield event, that they're going to take that event, but let's see what happens when we get to the sequence of play. So I'm actually going to call this video here for 2 reasons. 3 reasons actually. One, it's a little exhausting because I'm sort of new to the game, and I'm completely new to the bots. It takes a lot of effort for me to figure out what everybody is going to do and sort of a rule reading and so forth. The second reason is that I think I was a little ambitious, thinking that I was going to get through 6 or 7 cards per video. It's actually taking me a little bit longer to do it. I'm not really sure how long this video is running right now, because I'm just shooting now, so I'm going to sort of get it into the editor and see. And the third reason is I'd like to start getting some feedback from you all. about how it's going, whether you're enjoying it, and whether you have any comments about my play. So I just as soon go ahead and get this into the books, and hopefully my play will accelerate as we move forward, and we'll be able to do more cards. But as it is, I think it's going to take me quite a few more than 13 videos in order to complete this process. But that's okay. We'll see how it goes, and please join me on the next video.